The earliest memories were shrouded in a darkness Luna couldn't pierce. Cast out by her family at a tender age when her demon skin defied normality, Luna clung to the shadows of the woods, caves, and hidden waterfalls. Her unique gray-blue skin was her only cloak against discovery. A bounty on her head was a concept unknown to the young Luna until a kind family living beyond the realms she knew took her in. As I got older, I was able to walk the realms in clothing to hide my skin. Only then did she learn her lineage, thought long extinct, carried a price. Discovery meant a heavy reward for her captors and sale to the highest bidder. She jolted awake, breathing heavily, the recurring dream still echoing in her mind. The dream replayed her banishment at age 10, her gray-blue skin deemed an abnormality. "You don't belong here," her family had declared. "We cannot keep such a high-ranked child in the family. Discovery would mean our deaths and your sale to the slave markets." In moments like these, she wished for her memory to be erased. She slowly gets up and looks around to get her bearings. Nothing seemed out of place except a few paintings, drawings, and some books she had left out the night before. Her large, warm room held a bookshelf brimming with cherished reads. Pale pink walls shimmered with gold tracery, complementing dark cherry furniture carved with intricate designs. Luna sighed, rising from the bed in the home of the elderly couple who had taken her in years ago. Lately, she saw them only at meals. She'd grown accustomed to their distance, a precaution they claimed was for everyone's safety. They offered her peculiar texts, volumes on demonology and its history, thick and daunting. Quite the light reading, she thought wryly. From her closet, she chose a gleaming gold dress and flat slippers. Today, she decided to take a book and read in one of the Outer Realms parks. She donned a cloak, hoping its folds would conceal her skin and avert unwanted attention. She planned to visit a place where she could blend in better, the demon realms. Luna possessed long, braided white hair, a 5'6" frame, average build, and bright, warm, frost-colored eyes that complemented her unique gray-blue skin. A gentle demeanor and deep kindness defined her, extending even to those undeserving. Grudges rarely took root in her, reserved only for the gravest of wrongs, an infrequent occurrence. Gathering her bag and books, she descended the stairs, past photographs depicting her childhood with her adoptive family. She had grown accustomed to the paradox of a family both present and absent. In the kitchen, a breakfast spread awaited her. They must have set it out before they left. She sat and ate, then cleaned up the dishes and put away the food. She stepped out the door, starting down the dirt path toward the caves. The realms were a short walk from her home, allowing her quick, unhindered access. Minutes later, she reached the cave entrance. It yawned wide, dark for the first 5 feet, concealing its true depth. Few who dared venture beyond ever returned. Heavily guarded by a few gatekeepers, the realms were secured. Luna passed unimpeded. Her demonic scent, never acknowledged aloud, was always enough for the guards. The pathways of the realms beckoned peacefully, but Luna remained oblivious to the profound shift awaiting her day. Luna strode past the guards as usual, their customary silence unbroken. Along the main path, creatures and demons toiled at their daily tasks. Most had dwelled in the realms so long their skin sagged from their bones, their forms long decayed, now mere servants bound to their own demise. Luna averted her gaze, unable to bear the visceral imprint of their pain and suffering. Occasionally she attempted conversation, only to be met with recoiling forms or empty stares that faded into nothingness. Higher demons, cruel and dismissive, occasionally shoved her aside if she obstructed their path. Luna had learned evasion was her best recourse. Lately, she craved companionship, yet none lingered once they beheld her skin. The quick denial or visible hesitation in their eyes became a familiar sting. But she led on her way of doing things and just decided to stop looking for that one companion for a while. Who knows, maybe one will show up. She always passed an unusual house, one that starkly contrasted with its neighbors. Luna rarely lingered on it. The house bore the unmistakable grandeur of a higher demon's dwelling.
Its immense size in the lesser district always struck her as odd. Sometimes she imagined a figure watching from its highest window, perhaps ensuring their labor was done. Regardless, its strangeness urged her past, into a valley she'd chosen as her tranquil reading spot. Reaching the valley, she settled against a massive rock.
She welcomed the red-orange glow. Its heat cooled her skin rather than burning it. She opened a book and began to read. After some time, a subtle breeze nudged her hood, letting it slip from her head unnoticed. Eventually, a tap startled her shoulder. "I am busy," she said without looking up, assuming it was one of the many lessers at work in the area. A second tap, sharper than the first, pricked her shoulder. She lifted her gaze just an inch from her page. "Can't you see I am busy with my studies?" Then she realized her hood had fallen. Her eyes slowly widened as she peered up at her interrupter. Was it one of the higher demons? The demon's gaze, cold and unwavering, fixed on her, chains dangling from its clawed hand. "Keep quiet and come with me, miss," he hissed, his voice raw with menace. Luna felt the cold certainty of this day's arrival, desperately searching for an escape from her impending sail. "Your lineage, unseen for millennia, has slipped past detection for too long. Now you have nowhere to run. Be a good girl and hold still," he snarled. The demon crept closer, chains clinking, but before he could bind her, Luna unleashed a burst of power, sending him and his minions sprawling backward. Luna scrambled to her feet, bolting for the realm's gates, hoping to slip through unnoticed as she had before. She yanked her hood back up, covering half her face, just as the demon she'd repelled let out a roaring hiss. "Damn it," she muttered, "so much for keeping a low profile." Luna weaved through rocks and boulders, desperate to lose the demon. She gained some distance, only for the demon to close it seconds later. Finally, with a quick movement of her cloak and a whispered incantation, Luna vanished entirely. She then burst out the entrance she had used to enter. Breathing heavily as she locks the door to her room behind her, she dared not go out for a while till things settled, for she knew that she would put herself and her adopted family in great danger. About a month passed and everything seemed to have settled from the incident. Luna, as always, up in her room getting ready, but this time was to get ready for a dance her family insisted she go to. Although she rather not, she bid their wishes to go anyway. She put on a sleek silk gold gown with silver leaves etched into it, a low-cut back and a V-neck front no straps, along with a slit up the right leg to her hip. She wore it quite well for her size. It almost seemed like it slimmed her down a bit. She pulls her long braided hair up in a partial bun. With this color, it complemented her skin. She was nervous, and very well should be. Her skin is what either drives others away or attract the wrong people. Which will it be tonight? She had no idea. Luna lets out a sigh and adjusts her necklace. Well, let's get this night over with. With that being said, she set off back to the realms. This time she went full open, no cloak. Her tail swayed back and forth, luckily not catching the back of her dress at all. It just flowed with it. She crossed the threshold of the cave opening, took a deep breath and went on through. The realms looked the same as it always did, the lessers working as always, the guards and high demons keeping watch. Surprisingly this time, they left her alone. But they watched Luna closely and carefully, as if they were going to catch her at any moment. But none ever budged an inch, just kept their distance and watched. Luna kept walking past the house that looked so out of place. She looked up at the highest window with her frost ice-colored eyes that shined slightly but warm. She saw a figure up in the window, a male with dark copper-colored skin and dark eyes watching her. She stopped for a moment and just stared. But as soon as one of the higher demons pushed her forward, she was made to look down to keep going, as if she was being made to go regardless if she wanted to or not. The higher demon growled and hissed at her, so she stepped aside, letting them go past. It did not matter. As soon as the demon walked up beside her, he pushed her over.
"Mind your place, girl." The demon snarled and kept walking. The demon never minded the color of her skin. He did not care. Luna noticed the demon was not himself either, as he carried a rather large beer bottle gripped in his clawed hand, stumbling as he faded out of view. She watched as he faded, and she then slowly got up and dusted herself off. Luna checked over her dress and set off again. When she finally reached the entrance to the starry and stepped inside, she noticed that even her outfit, she stood out. Not many wore the fanciest of outfits. She was kind of hoping to blend in better with the crowd. So she walked in and wandered around for a while. She eventually found herself in the middle of the crowd and up towards what looked like a stage of some kind.
She was just more than happy that no one noticed she was there, really. I mean, a few did turn their heads and some mumbled among themselves while staring, but that was it. The music was very peaceful and low, not really expected for a place full of demons, almost like a ballad. Luna stood in place, avoiding bumping into others as she slightly swayed to the music. Her dress flowed quite well back and forth. She was glad she really was not drawing attention to herself, even toward the higher-ranked demons. After a while of dancing by herself, she did not notice everyone slowly stopped mingling and stopped dancing. Everyone had gone quiet, and she was so lost by the music. When she finally did, she stopped. She slowly looked around to see if anyone, or everyone for that matter, had their eyes on her. Luckily, no, they did not, but they were focused onto the stage. Luna jumped slightly out of her skin when a demon, a guard, roared as loud as he can to get everyone's attention. "It is time for the council!" The demon bellowed, and out of the corner of Luna's eye she stood still and watched about 10 demons or so slowly walk to the stage, and one who seemed a bit out of place, but felt like he was in his place. Luna carefully watched as they made the stage. She backed up a bit as she seemed to be right in front and in the center of the crowd. She really did not want to be the center of attention. Luna stayed quiet as the demons walked onto the stage, as some few in the rather large crowd spoke amongst themselves as quietly as possible. But when one of the guards growled and roared rather loudly, everything went dead silent. Luna looked up slightly onto the stage as the few higher demons took center stage and only one walked forward to the pedestal. She watched and listened carefully as the demon with dark skin and copper-color accents started talking. The demon had certainly caught her attention. However, she knew he was way out of her league, so she did not dare. However, something was trying to pull her to him. All she could hear was the word mine. It was something she never felt before with anyone. Luna reached up and traced her necklace. It was black in color and snug to the neck. She never took it off for anything or anyone for that matter. She wondered if she would ever see her family again. But then again, not likely, as last she heard they no longer lived in the area they used to, so it would be next to impossible to find them now. Luna stayed quiet as the demons walked onto the stage, as some few in the rather large crowd spoke amongst themselves as quietly as possible. But when one of the guards growled and roared rather loudly, everything went dead silent. Luna looked up slightly onto the stage as the few higher demons took center stage and only one walked forward to the pedestal. She watched and listened carefully as the demon with dark skin and copper-color accents started talking. The demon had certainly caught her attention. However, she knew he was way out of her league, so she did not dare. However, something was trying to pull her to him. All she could hear was the word mine. It was something she never felt before with anyone. Luna reached up and traced her necklace. It was black in color and snug to the neck. She never took it off for anything or anyone for that matter. She wondered if she would ever see her family again. But then again, not likely, as last she heard, they no longer lived in the area they used to, so it would be next to impossible to find them now. After some daydreaming, she was finally snapped back into reality when one of the guards bellowed out a roar to end the story for the night. Luna looked up to find that the demon was looking back at her. He looked like he was about to say something, but however, one of the drunken higher demons decided to push Luna out of the way, deeper into the crowd, not giving much time to react. She had already knew he was way out of her league, so she decided to turn and head for home before her cloaking wore off and she would be spotted by everyone. After a few minutes, she found herself back at the entrance. She knew it was not the last time she would see the demon. Something told her, however, she needed to go back within the next day or so just to see if she can catch the eye of the demon who struck her interest, and possibly the rest of her life would change. For the rest of the night, she could not focus on her studies. She awoke the next morning, realizing she had fallen asleep at her desk. She felt like she was hit by a tree. She groaned as the sunlight hit her in the eyes. She looked over to see what time it was. The strange thing is, she did not drink anything last night. She looked around her room. Interestingly enough, she had no studies to do. No new books or papers. They must have forgotten, she thought. She did not pay that much mind to it and gathered her books in her pack and started out the door and down the path. It was a bright day and she knew it would be nice in the realms. Not only would it be peaceful, she imagined at that time in the morning everyone would still be asleep, except for the leaders that worked around the clock. She entered the cave and went on through the portal. As Luna quietly took light steps past the guards, she was right. They were asleep. As soon as she got past them, she quickly but quietly moved through the streets. This time she had to get the attention of the demon, at least somehow. She got to the tall building and she stopped, then looked up. Was he really in this place? She did not know. All she could do was be wary and keep slightly out of sight. She waited for a good few minutes and still no movement or sound. So Luna decided to move along back to the park. But this time she settled up against the side of a rather large pine tree. Seemed kind of unusual of a tree growing here, but hey, not rare either. She pulled out her book and started to read, once in a while looking up towards the house, but also keeping an eye on whoever would walk past at this time of day. She did not want to run into that slaver, even though there were days she wished they would. However, she knew that most of the people who bought slaves were none too kind to them. Many were easily abused. Very few got lucky enough that the family would let the slave live just as good as they do. She stayed a lot longer than she should have, but the fact that she could not focus on her books, she most wanted to see the demon again. It was about 5 p.m. and was getting rather late, so she started putting her books back in her bag to head home. She did not see what was approaching behind her. When she went to get up, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Of course, by this time she had faced away from the house she thought the demon lived in and was facing the lake as the full moon rose up into the sky. Luna froze in place and dared not to turn around quickly or try to run. She was afraid that after so many years of running and hiding, she was finally caught to be sold as a slave, or at the very least to be tested on. Luna starts to slowly stand, only to be forced back down, hearing a low growl. "Do not even think about it. You evaded me once. You will not be doing it again." Luna's eyes go wide and she starts to shiver, not knowing what to do. She hears the clanking of metal, only to assume was chains of some sort. Then, out of nowhere, she feels something cold go around her throat, and all she hears from it is something locking into place. The demon behind her growls and pulls on the chain that is hooked to the clasp. "Now, since you cannot go anywhere, you may as well come quietly. Your bloodline is very valuable, and the highest bidder would pay a very, very heavy price." Luna lets out a growl and starts to struggle, pulling against the chain that was hooked to her. "I will never go with you. Let me go." The demon yanked on the chain, sending Luna straight to the ground face first. With a groan, Luna looked up out of the corner of her eye, clenching her fangs. The demon got inches from her face with the chain pulled tight. "You don't have a choice, girl. Now you best do as you're told." The demon pulls Luna up by the chain to her feet and drags her along. Seems at this moment she had no choice, so she slowly goes along with it. The part of the realms for slavers was not too bright at all, very dank and dark. Not many dared to venture here. She kept her head mostly down, but her eyes darted back and forth, watching everyone she could see. They then stopped. The slaver opened a cage door and pushed Luna inside, then locked it. She kept her cloak on and hood over her face, partly so no one could see. "Now let's see who will buy that pretty hide of yours in a couple of hours," the demon laughed as he hits the bars of the cage with his fists and walks away. By that time, other demons started looking in the cage at her, making sneer comments on what they could do to her or have her do once they bought her. Luna stayed still and kept quiet, was all she could do so no one really bothered her. Couple hours go by and all of a sudden the cage starts to move. Luna did not see where she was being taken to. From what it looked like was a rather large arena and a huge open stage in its center. She knew the day finally came. She was to be sold to someone, and whoever it was would not matter if they were going to abuse her or be kind to her. Whoever was doing the selling only mattered about the money that came with it. As they walk the cage along the rows of demons and buyers, one catches her eye. She looks over through the corner of her eye and sees someone in a long trench coat. Could not see their face, though. She sighs to herself as they finally reach the stage and sits her down, right in the middle of it. The slaver strode to the front of the cage, a cruel grin splitting his face. He grabbed the bars with one hand and a thick, rusted chain with the other. A mechanism groaned, and the front of the cage lifted, exposing her fully to the leering, hungry eyes of the assembled crowd. A wave of murmurs rippled through the arena, a mix of greed, lust, and scientific curiosity. "Behold!" the slaver bellowed, his voice magically amplified to reach the highest tiers of stone seating. "A prize not seen in 1,000 cycles, the last of her kind." With a flick of his wrist, he snagged the edge of her cloak and ripped it from her shoulders. The fine gold fabric of her gown shimmered under the arena's harsh, ethereal lighting, but it was her skin that drew a collective gasp from the audience. The unique gray-blue hue seemed to drink in the light, a stark contrast to the fiery reds, char-blacks, and sickly greens of the demons watching. "Behold!" the slaver bellowed, his voice magically amplified to reach the highest tiers of stone seating. "A prize not seen in 1,000 cycles, the last of her kind." With a flick of his wrist, he snagged the edge of her cloak and ripped it from her shoulders. The fine gold fabric of her gown shimmered under the arena's harsh, ethereal lighting, but it was her skin that drew a collective gasp from the audience. The unique gray-blue hue seemed to drink in the light, a stark contrast to the fiery reds, char-blacks, and sickly greens of the demons watching. Her long white braid fell over one shoulder, and her frost-colored eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and defiance, scanned the sea of monstrous faces. The slaver grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back to display the cold metal collar around her neck. The lineage of the Silurians, thought to be myth, thought to be extinct. Their blood holds ancient power. Their skin is impervious to all but the most potent of magics. What will you bid for this singular treasure? A warrior, a servant, a breeder to revive a long-dead line. The bidding started immediately, a chaotic roar of numbers and shouted claims. A corpulent demon with multiple mouths shrieked a price that made Luna's stomach clench. A wisp-thin sorcerer with eyes like burning coals countered instantly. The price climbed higher and higher, the numbers becoming meaningless sounds to Luna. She felt like a piece of meat, a decorative object to be claimed. Her gaze darted desperately, searching for an escape that didn't exist. She saw the figure in the trench coat again, standing motionless near one of the main tunnels, an island of calm in the frenzied storm of bidding. Just as the slaver was about to bring his gavel down for a grotesque horned warlord, a new voice cut through the din. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that silenced every other creature in the arena. 1,000,000 soul shards. The crowd turned as one. Stepping out from the tunnel, shedding the long trench coat to reveal the same impeccably tailored dark tunic from the starry, was the council demon. The copper accents on his clothing seemed to glow with their own inner fire. His dark eyes were fixed not on the slaver, but directly on Luna. As their gazes locked,
The sensation from the night before returned tenfold, a shock wave that vibrated through her very soul. Mine. This time, the word felt less like a thought and more like a fact, a fundamental truth of the universe settling into place. The slaver's jaw dropped. "Lord Malakor, an honor," he stammered, bowing low. "A winning bid indeed." Malakor took a slow, deliberate step forward, his presence forcing a path to clear through the crowd. "That was not a bid," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that still reached every ear. "It was a statement of value. She is not for sale." The slaver's greedy smile faltered, replaced by confusion and fear. "But, my lord, the auction—"
"The auction is over," Malakor stated, now standing just feet from the stage. He tossed a small, heavy pouch onto the stage floor. It landed with a soft, final thud. "Your payment for having found her. Now, open the cage." The slaver scrambled to obey, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the lock. The moment the gate swung open, Malakor was on the stage. He ignored the slaver completely, his entire focus on Luna. He knelt before her, his expression unreadable, and reached for the collar. His fingers, warm and surprisingly gentle, brushed against her skin as he examined the locking mechanism. A soft click echoed in the silent arena, and the cold metal fell away from her neck. He rose to his full, intimidating height, extending a hand to her. "Come," was all he said. Luna hesitated, staring at his offered hand. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But underneath it, that strange, powerful connection hummed, pulling her in, promising something. Safety? Destiny? She didn't know, but it was a better choice than any other she had. Slowly, she placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, secure, and as he gently pulled her to her feet, his dark eyes never left hers. He led her off the stage, the entire demon realm watching in stunned silence as he claimed his prize. The crowd parted before them, a wave of fear and deference, creating a wide path through the arena's main tunnel. Malakor's grip on her hand was not painful, but it was absolute, an anchor in the swirling vortex of her emotions. No one dared meet their eyes. The lessers bowed their heads until their chins touched their chests, while the higher demons simply averted their gazes, a clear sign of respect for a power they would not challenge. As they reached the shadowed exit of the arena, the slaver's greedy voice rang out from behind them. "My lord, that pouch, it is generous, but the bidding had reached far beyond that sum, a creature of her rarity." Malakor stopped, but did not turn. The temperature in the tunnel dropped several degrees. "You were paid for finding her," he said, his voice a low vibration that seemed to shake the very stones. "You were not paid for owning her. You never did." "But," the slaver began, taking a foolish step forward. Without looking back, Malakor made a subtle gesture with his free hand. A shadow detached itself from the wall, coalescing into a whip-thin tendril of pure darkness. It lashed out, silent and swift, wrapping around the slaver's throat. The demon clawed at the umbral appendage, his gurgles turning to choked silence as he was lifted a foot off the ground. "Be grateful you are leaving with your life," Malakor stated coldly. "Do not tempt me to reconsider my generosity." With another flick of his wrist, the shadow dissipated, dropping the gasping, terrified slaver to the grimy floor. Malakor resumed walking as if nothing had happened, pulling Luna gently along with him. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was a power she had never witnessed up close, effortless, absolute, and utterly terrifying. They emerged into the crimson twilight of the main thoroughfare. The walk to the strange, out-of-place house was conducted in utter silence. Luna watched as the world she knew warped around his presence. Demons who had once pushed her aside now scrambled to get out of their path. She was no longer invisible or a target of scorn. She was an attachment to him, and that granted her a terrifying, unasked-for status. The house was even more imposing up close. Carved from a single piece of obsidian-like rock, it seemed to absorb the realm's reddish light rather than reflect it. The heavy iron-banded door swung open on its own as they approached, revealing not the expected gloom, but a vast, quiet hall. The floors were polished marble that swirled with veins of silver. The air smelled not of sulfur and decay, but of old paper, strange incense, and something clean, like ozone after a storm. Tapestries depicting ancient battles and forgotten constellations hung on the walls, their threads glowing with a subtle luminescence. He led her through the silent hall and into a vast library. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound tomes. In the center of the room, a low fire crackled in a wide hearth, casting a warm, flickering light. He finally released her hand and turned to face her fully. For the first time, Luna could see the details of his face. Sharp, aristocratic features, skin like burnished copper, and eyes that held the depth of a starless night sky. "You have questions," he stated. It was not a question. Luna found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Are you going to sell me?" A flicker of something, annoyance, surprise, crossed his features. "I do not buy things only to sell them, especially not when they are priceless." He gestured to a pair of high-backed chairs near the fire. "Sit."
"You must be exhausted." Wary, she did as he asked, perching on the edge of the plush velvet cushion. He remained standing, looking down at her, his expression intense. "That necklace you wear," he said, his voice softer now. "The one you touch when you are anxious. Who gave it to you?" Luna's hand flew to her throat, her fingers closing around the familiar snug band. The family that took me in, they said it would protect me." Malakor's lips thinned into a grim line. "Protect you or control you?" He took a step closer, his gaze locked on the black collar. "It is a suppressor, little one, a very old, very powerful one. It dampens your true nature, hides your full power from the world, and from yourself." Luna's fingers tightened on the smooth, cool band. "No, they said it was for my safety, to help me blend in." "A cage gilded with good intentions is still a cage," Malakor countered, his voice devoid of pity. "They hid you, yes, but in doing so, they left you ignorant, defenseless. They severed you from your own heritage, leaving you to believe you were nothing more than a curiosity with unusually colored skin." He took another step, his presence dominating the vast room. The firelight danced across the sharp planes of his face, making his dark eyes seem like portals to another dimension. "That collar has been bleeding your essence since the day it was clasped around your neck. It muted your scent, clouded the minds of those who looked too closely, and, most importantly, it blocked your access to the memories inherent in your bloodline." Her breath hitched. The dream, the fragmented, frustrating loop of her childhood trauma. Was that all they had left her with? "My memories?" she whispered, the word tasting of ash. "Every Silurian is born with the echo of their ancestors, a wellspring of knowledge, instinct, and power. Yours has been damned." He stopped before her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I can remove it, but I must warn you, the sudden return of what you have lost, it will not be pleasant." The choice hung in the air between them, heavy and absolute. To trust this terrifying, magnificent demon who had bought her and spoken of her as a possession? Or to cling to the half-life given to her by a family whose kindness might have been a lie? She thought of the slavers' chains, the leering crowd, the constant, gnawing fear she had lived with her entire life.
Then she looked into Malakor's eyes and felt that impossible, soul-deep resonance again. It wasn't a feeling of being owned, it was a feeling of being found. Slowly, she nodded. He didn't touch her. Instead, he raised his hand, palm open, a few inches from her throat. A low hum filled the room, vibrating from his body and sinking into her bones. The black necklace began to glow with a faint, angry red light. It grew hotter against her skin, not a burning heat, but a deep, pressurized warmth that made it hard to breathe. "Do not fight it," he commanded, his voice a low anchor in the rising storm inside her. A dam inside her broke. It was not a gentle release, but a violent, explosive shattering. A roar filled her ears, silencing the crackling fire. A blinding white light flared behind her eyes, and with it came a torrent of sensation. She felt the chill of deep space, tasted the metallic tang of a dying star, and heard the whispered symphony of 1,000 generations of her ancestors all speaking at once. Images, sharp and painful, flooded her mind. A city of glowing silver spires under a violet sky. Her true parents, their faces shimmering with starlight, their skin the same gray-blue as hers, smiling down at her. The language of her people, flowing into her mind not as words to be learned, but as truths to be remembered. And the power, oh, the power! It was like cold fire, a liquid universe pouring through her veins, awakening dormant nerves and rewriting her very cells. Faint, intricate silver patterns, like frost on a winter windowpane, bloomed across her skin, her arms, her neck, her face, glowing with a soft, internal luminescence before slowly fading back to subtlety. Her frost-colored eyes blazed with light, the pupils momentarily becoming silver stars. The black necklace clattered to the marble floor, now just a dull, lifeless piece of metal. The sudden, overwhelming influx was too much. The library spun, the 1,000 voices became a deafening shriek, and the light behind her eyes consumed everything. With a final shuddering gasp, Luna's world went dark, and she pitched forward into unconsciousness. Malakor caught her before she hit the floor, sweeping her into his arms with an ease that belied her weight. She was limp, her head lolling against his shoulder, her white hair spilling over his dark tunic. He looked down at her face, now peaceful in its slumber, and noted the faint, silvery tracings that now shimmered just beneath the surface of her skin. He carried her from the library, his long stride silent on the marble floors, and ascended a grand, winding staircase. The corridors of his home were dark and quiet, but they seemed to bend to his will, a path lighting before him as he walked. He entered a large, sparsely furnished bedchamber, where the only light came from a vast window that looked out not on the fiery realm outside, but on a swirling nebula of purple and gold. Gently, he laid her down on the bed of black silk sheets, pulling a heavy velvet blanket over her. For a long moment, he simply stood and watched her, his expression a mask of unreadable contemplation. "Asleep," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that was more for himself than for her. "Good. When you wake, your education will begin." He left her in the silence, a stark contrast to the roaring chaos that now filled her mind. Consciousness was a maelstrom. She was no longer just Luna. She was a vessel for echoes, a library of lives she had never lived. She felt the grief of a matriarch losing her mate in the Starfall Wars, the triumphant cry of a warrior shaping a moon with sheer will, the patient focus of an artisan weaving light into tangible threads. The name Silurian was no longer a label. It was an identity, a legacy of cosmic power and devastating loss.
When her eyes finally fluttered open, it was not to the pain of a crashing wave, but to the stillness of the sea after a storm. The first thing she noticed was the window. It was not glass, but a perfect, shimmering void, and beyond it, the swirling gases of the Æthelgard Nebula burned in hues of violet and gold. She knew its name without ever having heard it. She knew the dust lanes were rich in nascent souls, and that the heart of it pulsed with a rhythm that matched her own. Her senses were painfully sharp. She could feel the individual threads in the silk sheets against her skin, hear the faint, rhythmic thrum of power circulating through the obsidian walls of the house, and smell the lingering trace of ozone and ancient parchment that clung to Malakor himself, though he was not in the room. Pushing herself up, she felt a profound shift in her own body. The familiar weight of her limbs was gone, replaced by a feeling of coiled energy, a thrumming potential that lived deep in her bones. The faint silver markings she'd seen in her mind's eye were now visible on her skin in the dim light, delicate as spider silk and pulsing with a soft internal glow. The door opened without a sound. Malakor stood in the entryway, holding a simple silver tray with a steaming cup and a piece of dark, glossy bread. He was not looking at her, but at the nebula, his expression uncharacteristically distant. "You are awake," he observed, his gaze finally shifting to meet hers. The intensity was still there, but now she could see past it. She could perceive the immense, ancient weight of his own existence, the millennia of solitude etched into the lines of his face. The influx has settled. What am I?" Luna asked, her voice clearer and stronger than it had ever been. "You are what you have always been," he replied, setting the tray on a small table near the bed. "You were simply reading from a single tattered page of a boundless book. Now the library is open." He picked up the cup. "Drink. Your body has just undergone a fundamental recalibration. It requires sustenance." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. A spark, not of static, but of pure energy, jumped between them. He did not flinch, but his eyes darkened for a fraction of a second. The liquid inside was warm and tasted of spiced honey and something metallic, like blood and stars. As she drank, she felt her own humming energy stabilize, the last echoes of the ancestral choir fading into a manageable background hum. "Why?" she asked again, more pointedly this time. "Why do this for me? That slaver was right. My bloodline is valuable. You could have." "I could have done many things," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "I could have left you collared, a muted weapon to be wielded. I could have siphoned your power for my own. I could have allowed you to be sold to the horned warlord, who would have tried to breed you like livestock until your spirit broke." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "The Silurians were not just powerful, Luna. They were cosmic stabilizers, anchors against the chaos that seeks to unravel reality. Your ancestors were murdered not for their value, but for their function. Certain entities prefer chaos." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Your existence is a threat to them, and a necessity for me." Before she could process the implications, he acted. With a flick of his wrist, the silver tray flew from the table, hurtling directly at her face. There was no time to think, no moment to react. There was only instinct. Luna's left hand shot up. A shield of shimmering silver energy, etched with the same patterns as her skin, materialized in the air before her. The tray struck it with a deafening clang and crumpled into a ball of metal, falling harmlessly to the floor. The shield held for a second longer before dissipating into motes of light. She stared at her own hand, trembling. The power had come from her as easily as breathing. Malakor's expression was grimly satisfied. "That is your first lesson. Your power is part of you now. It is not a tool to be picked up. It is a limb to be moved. We have much work to do. The forces that hunted your people into oblivion are not gone. They are merely patient. He turned to leave, his dark tunic swirling around him. And they have just felt you awaken. His gaze swept over her as she lay there, a flicker of an unreadable emotion in their dark depths. Rest, he commanded softly, the word a silken thread of power in the quiet room. The deluge will recede. Your mind must find its own sea level before it can navigate the currents. With that, he turned and was gone, the door closing with a soft, final click, leaving Luna adrift in the ocean of her ancestors. When she awoke, the violent storm in her mind had calmed to a deep, powerful tide. She felt the memories not as a chaotic flood, but as a vast, submerged library she could now access. The name of the nebula, Ethelgard, was there. The composition of the obsidian walls, a unique, power-dampening stone called nocturnite, was also there. And the knowledge of Malakor himself, that was there too. A single heavily warded book in the center of the library, radiating immense age and a sorrow so profound it was almost a physical weight. She sat up, the silk sheets pooling around her. The silver markings on her skin now pulsed with a gentle, steady light, like constellations beneath her skin, mirroring the nebula outside. She was not just stronger, she was more complete. The door opened and Malakor entered, this time without a tray. He wore a simple, dark gray tunic that seemed to absorb the light from the nebula. His eyes fixed on hers, and for the first time she did not flinch. She saw the calculation there, the ancient planning, but she also saw the truth of his words. He viewed her as a necessity.
"You have settled," he observed. "Good. The first lesson was reactive, the second is control." He raised a hand, and the crumpled ball of metal that was once the silver tray lifted from the floor where it had fallen. It hovered in the air between them. "Your power is like a language you have suddenly remembered. You know the words, but you are out of practice with the grammar. Right now it is a shout. You must learn to make it a whisper." He gestured to the mangled metal. "Unmake what you have done. Reform it." Luna looked at the metal, then at her own hands. She closed her eyes, not trying to force the power, but reaching for it, inviting it. She remembered an ancestor, a Silurian artisan, who could weave starlight into solid forms. She pictured the tray as it had been, smooth, gleaming, perfect. A silver light enveloped her hands, extending in fine threads towards the metal ball. The metal groaned, resisting. It was harder than she thought. Her brow furrowed in concentration. The silver threads tightened, pulling and pushing, the metal slowly, arduously, beginning to straighten. "Do not simply force it," Malakor's voice cut through her focus. "Feel its nature. It does not wish to be a crumpled ball. It wishes to return to its intended form. Persuade it, do not command it." She took a breath, easing the raw pressure of her will. She let her power flow more gently, feeling the molecular structure of the silver, the memory of its forging. The process smoothed, the groaning ceased, and the metal began to flow like liquid mercury, reshaping itself under her delicate guidance. Within a minute, the tray was whole again, floating perfectly in the air. It was not just repaired, it was more brilliant than before, the surface flawless. She opened her eyes, a gasp of astonishment escaping her lips as the tray gently floated down to rest on the table. A rare faint smile touched Malakor's lips. "Instinct and control. You learn quickly. That is fortunate, because our time is short." He turned his gaze to the swirling nebula in the window. "They will not send an army, not at first. They will send a hunter, an assassin whose specialty was the destruction of your kind." Luna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Who are they? They call themselves the Null, beings from the void between realities. They do not build or create, they consume.
They despise order, and the Silurians were the ultimate architects of it.
Your very existence is anathema to them. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact, as if discussing ancient history that had suddenly become current events. Now, he said, turning back to her, his expression all business. Dress. We are going to the Umbral Forge. Your education in combat begins immediately. The assassin will not wait for you to become a master. Behind a screen of carved obsidian, a chamber she hadn't noticed was revealed. Laid out on a stone bench was a suit of dark, supple material that felt like woven night. It was not a dress or a tunic, but a form-fitting garment of trousers and a long-sleeved top that shimmered with faint, silvery threads. Beside it were soft, silent boots. There was no argument to be made. This was not a request. She shed the golden gown, the last remnant of her old life, and donned the combat suit. It fit her as if it had been made for her, moving with her body without restriction, feeling more like a second skin than armor. When she emerged, Malakor gave a single, sharp nod of approval. He turned without a word and began to walk, and she followed. They did not leave the house. Instead, he led her deeper into its impossible geometry. They descended staircases that spiraled into darkness, only to arrive in corridors bathed in the light of captured stars. They passed through archways that looked out onto alien deserts for a fleeting moment before resolving back into polished stone. The house was not a building. It was a pocket universe, a labyrinth of Malakor's own making. Finally, they came to a set of immense iron-bound doors that hummed with contained power. The air here was thick, smelling of cooled magma and ozone. Malakor placed a hand on the door, and the hum intensified. The doors swung inward, revealing a cavern so vast it seemed to have no ceiling. This was the Umbral Forge. Floating in the immense space were anvils of solidified night and hammers that pulsed with dark energy. Runes glowed on the cavern walls, shifting and reforming like living constellations. The only sound was a deep, resonant thrum, the sound of creation itself. The null assassin will not fight you with brute force, Malakor said, his voice echoing in the vastness. It will be a creature of shadow and silence. It will use weapons forged from the emptiness between atoms, blades that sever not flesh, but the soul. He turned to her, his dark eyes pinning her in place. You cannot fight such a thing with a shield. You must meet it with a weapon of your own. Your lineage gives you the ability to manifest one. Manifest? Luna asked, looking at her empty hands. Your power is a physical extension of your spirit. Your ancestors could shape light and gravity as easily as a smith shapes steel. Reach inside yourself. Find the part of you that is a blade, the part that cuts. Give it form. Luna closed her eyes. She reached for the thrumming energy inside her, the cold fire that was now a part of her. She tried to picture a sword, the kind she had read about in her books. A flicker of silver light sputtered in her palm and died. You are thinking. Malakor's voice was sharp, critical. You are trying to copy an idea. A Silurian weapon is not an idea. It is an inevitability. It is the shape of your will. Stop thinking. Feel. What form does your resolve take? She pushed the images of swords away. She thought of her life, the years of hiding, of being pushed aside, of being hunted, the terror in the slaver's cage, and then the new, fierce determination that had taken root in her soul, a resolve not just to survive, but to stand her ground, to end the threat, not to parry, but to reap. The memory of an ancestor flashed in her mind, a tall, stern Silurian matriarch standing before a collapsing star, wielding not a sword, but a crescent of pure energy, a weapon for harvesting, for ending cycles. Luna opened her eyes. She lifted her hand, and this time she did not force it. She allowed it. A handle of polished, night-dark material flowed into her grip, cool and solid. From its end, a blade of pure condensed starlight erupted, curving into the graceful, lethal arc of a scythe. It did not reflect light. It was light, its edge humming with a terrifyingly sharp note. The silver patterns on her skin glowed brightly in response, connecting her to the weapon. Malakor watched, his expression unreadable, but a glint of what might have been pride shone deep in his eyes. "Good. You have found your form." He took a step back. "Now, let us see how you wield it." He snapped his fingers. From the shadowed floor of the forge, a pool of darkness congealed, rising up and taking the shape of a humanoid figure. It was featureless, a silhouette given three-dimensional form, and in its hand it held a blade of utter blackness that seemed to drink the light around it. "The construct cannot be destroyed by normal means," Malakor stated calmly. "It will not tire. It will not stop until I command it, or until you sever the shadow that binds it." The shadow construct lunged. The world dissolved into silent, fluid motion. There was no sound of rushing air, no stomp of feet on the stone floor. The shadow simply flowed forward, a river of absolute blackness. Luna reacted on pure, panicked instinct, swinging the scythe in a clumsy horizontal arc. The blade of starlight met the shadow's sword not with a clang of metal, but with a jarring thrum that vibrated up her arms and into her teeth. There was no physical resistance, yet the impact stopped the construct's advance. The shadow blade sizzled where it made contact with her light, a faint wisp of nothingness rising from the point of intersection. It disengaged instantly, its movements impossibly fluid, and flowed around her side. Luna spun, barely bringing the scythe's shaft around to block a second, silent strike aimed at her ribs. Again, the jarring, non-physical impact. "Your feet are clumsy," Malakar's voice boomed from the sidelines, sharp as breaking glass. "You are swinging it like a farmer's tool. It is an extension of your body. Move with it." The construct gave her no time to process the critique. It was a relentless flurry of attacks, each one silent, each one aimed with perfect precision. It didn't need to see, it simply knew where she was. Luna was forced back, her defense a series of desperate, jarring blocks. She was fighting a phantom, an enemy without weight or substance, yet whose blows felt like being struck by a cold, leaden certainty. She risked a glance at her weapon. The starlight blade was not chipping or cracking, it was holding. But she was losing. The construct's speed was unnatural, and her body, though enhanced, was still new to this strain. Her arms ached with the effort of holding back the void. "Anticipate, don't react," Malakor commanded. "You can feel its intent. Your blood remembers this fight. Let it guide you." Frustrated, she tried to go on the offensive, sweeping the scythe in a wide, reaping motion. The construct simply dissolved into the floor, becoming a flat pool of shadow that slid beneath the attack, reforming behind her in the blink of an eye. She felt a searing cold rake across her back before she could turn. She cried out, stumbling forward, but when she reached back, there was no wound. The combat suit was untouched, her skin was whole. Yet a wave of profound hopelessness washed over her, a chilling despair that made her muscles feel heavy and her will begin to fray. "Its weapon is despair," Malakor's voice was grim. "It severs threads of spirit. A few more blows like that, and you will simply give up, lie down, and welcome your own unmaking. Meet it with will, not with force. The construct advanced again, its dark blade poised. Luna understood now. She couldn't block the weapon's effect, only its physical form. She couldn't outfight this thing with speed and strength she didn't possess. Malakor was right. She had to stop reacting. She closed her eyes. The darkness of the forge was absolute, but it was not empty. With her physical sight gone, her other senses, the ones her Silurian blood provided, bloomed. She could feel the deep thrum of the forge's power. She could feel the cold, focused malice of the construct. And she could feel the thin, almost invisible thread of Malakor's power that animated it, tethering it to his will like a cosmic puppeteer. The construct lunged. Luna didn't see it. She felt its path through the world, a ripple in the fabric of the forge. Instead of blocking, she moved with the attack, letting her body flow to the side in a dancer's grace she didn't know she possessed. The blade of despair slid past her cheek, its chilling aura raising the hairs on her neck. Her eyes remained closed. She was no longer fighting the construct's body. She was fighting the shadow that bound it. The scythe in her hand felt light, no longer a heavy tool, but a part of her soul made manifest. As the construct flowed past her to reorient, she pivoted on her heel, her body coiling like a spring. She did not swing at the shadow figure. With a final, fluid motion, she brought the scythe around in a low, graceful arc, severing the air where she sensed the tether of Malakor's power. The starlight blade cut through nothing visible, but the effect was instantaneous. The shadow construct froze mid-stride. A tremor ran through its featureless form. Cracks of silver light, like a shattered mirror, appeared across its body. Then, with a silent implosion, it collapsed, dissolving into a harmless, inky puddle on the obsidian floor. Luna stood panting, the scythe's light dimming slightly as her adrenaline receded. She opened her eyes. The forge was silent once more. Malakor walked toward her, his footsteps the only sound in the vast cavern. He stopped before her, his gaze sweeping over her from head to toe, then resting on the weapon in her hand. "You took too long," he stated, his voice flat. "You allowed it to strike you. Against the true assassin, that single blow would have been enough to rot your resolve from the inside out." Luna's shoulders slumped slightly, the victory turning sour. "However," he continued, a flicker of something akin to approval in his dark eyes, "you learned. You stopped fighting the puppet and cut the strings. A lesson that takes most warriors a lifetime to comprehend." He gestured to the scythe. "That is not a mere weapon. It is a key. It can sever connections, physical and metaphysical. It can reap energy as easily as it can reap flesh. You have a formidable tool. Now you must become a formidable wielder." He turned, his back to her. "This was a primer. From this moment on, your training will not cease. You will eat, sleep, and breathe combat until your instinct and your body are one. The hunter that is coming is patient, but its patience has a limit. And when it arrives, I will not be here to shout instructions from the sidelines." His words hung in the vastness of the forge, colder and harder than any anvil. There was no rest. The next cycle of dim ambient light that passed for day in the forge found her facing not one, but 3 shadow constructs. The days that followed blurred into a single, aching continuum of exertion and pain. He drove her relentlessly, pushing her past exhaustion, until her movements were no longer dictated by conscious thought, but by a deeper, more primal instinct. She learned to use the curve of her scythe not just for reaping, but for deflection, hooking a shadow's limb to spin it off balance. She fought in simulations of dense forests where she had to cut through phantom trees to reach her target, and in swirling zero-gravity arenas where every movement had to be precise. The golden gown from the starry seemed like a relic from another person's life, a fragile memory of a girl who had never known the feeling of spiritual exhaustion or the grim satisfaction of landing a perfect strike. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, she finally managed to dissipate all three constructs simultaneously, the silver light from her scythe flaring in a triumphant nova before dimming. She fell to one knee, her breath coming in ragged gasps, the combat suit slick with sweat. Malakor approached, his face as impassive as ever. "You are still too slow," he said. "I'm doing everything I can," she bit back, her voice raw. "Why? Why will you not be here? With your power, we could face this hunter together. We could end it." "Because the hunter is not the true threat," he replied, his voice dropping. "It is bait, a probe sent into the dark to see what responds. Its purpose is to find anomalies, survivors. If I reveal myself fighting alongside you, I confirm their deepest fears, that a lord of my order has allied with a Silurian heir. They will stop sending hunters and start sending legions. My absence is your only shield against a war you cannot yet fathom." He knelt, an uncharacteristically vulnerable gesture, and placed a hand on the obsidian floor. The stone rippled, and an image formed between them, a galaxy, vast and swirling. Then, from the edges, a creeping, cancerous darkness began to spread, extinguishing stars as it moved. "This is the work of the null," he murmured. "This is the scale of the conflict. I fight by remaining a ghost, a rumor, a hidden blade in a war of shadows. You must become the same. To fight the hunter is your test. To survive it is to prove you are a piece on the board worth protecting." The image faded. His explanation left no room for argument, only a cold, heavy understanding. Her fight was not just for her own life. It was a move in a cosmic game she was only just beginning to comprehend. The next phase of her training changed. He no longer pitted her against constructs in open combat. Instead, he would have her stand in the center of the forge, blindfolded, and simply wait. A whisper of displaced air, a subtle drop in temperature, the faintest scrape of shadow on stone. These were her only warnings before a silent attack she had to sense and evade. He was teaching her to fight an absence, to see a presence in the void. Days of this past, each filled with tense silence broken by sudden, desperate explosions of movement. Her failures were met with the soul-chilling touch of a despair blade, leaving her to fight off waves of crushing apathy. But her successes grew more frequent. She began to feel the world not just with her eyes and ears, but with the very essence of her being. She was meditating in her room, trying to calm the constant hum of power in her veins, when she felt it. A wrongness. It was a subtle discord in the perfect rhythm of the Athelgard Nebula outside her window. She looked up. In the heart of the swirling violet and gold, a spot of perfect, utter blackness had appeared. It was not a shadow, it was a hole, a void that did not absorb light but erased it from existence. Her door flew open. Malakor stood there, his face grim, his dark eyes fixed on the stain in the nebula. "It is here," he said. "It has breached the outer wards of this realm." A cold dread, sharper than any despair blade, pierced Luna. It was no longer training, it was real. He led her not to the forge, but to a simple, unadorned chamber with a single stone archway at its center. The air within the arch shimmered, showing not the realm outside, but the familiar dirt path leading to the caves near her adopted family's home. "It will hunt you where you are most comfortable, where your memories are strongest," he stated, his gaze intense. "It will use the familiar as a weapon. Do not trust the scenery. Do not trust the voices you might hear. Trust only what you can feel with your essence." He reached out, not to touch her, but to adjust a strap on her combat suit that was already perfectly placed. It was a small, almost human gesture of concern. "Remember your lessons. You are not a farmer with a tool. You are a reaper, and this is your harvest." He then stepped back and turned to a blank wall. He traced a complex rune in the air with one finger, and the nocturnite stone flowed away, revealing another archway, this one filled with a swirling vortex of shadow and starlight. His path. "Once you step through, you are on your own," he said, his back still to her. "Survive this, Luna. Become the ghost they fear." Without another word, he stepped into his own portal and was gone. The wall sealed behind him, leaving no trace. The vast house, her training ground and sanctuary, suddenly felt terrifyingly empty. All that was left was Luna, her scythe, and the shimmering portal leading back to a world that was about to become a hunting ground. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she clutched the handle of her weapon and stepped through the arch. The transition was jarring. One moment, the cool, contained power of the nocturnite chamber. The next, the overwhelming reality of a world she had almost forgotten. The air was warm and thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Sunlight, brighter and yellower than any light in Malakor's home, speared through the canopy, forcing her to squint. For a full minute, she simply stood, recalibrating her senses, which screamed with 1,000 new inputs. The buzz of an insect, the rustle of a leaf in the wind, the distant call of a bird. It was a cacophony compared to the purposeful silence she had grown accustomed to. Her home was just as she remembered it, a quaint stone cottage with a curl of smoke rising from the chimney. A sense of unease settled in her stomach. The smoke seemed wrong, too thick, too deliberate, like a stage prop. As she drew closer, she saw her adopted mother, Ilara, tending the small garden out front. Ilara looked up, her wrinkled face breaking into a wide, joyous smile. "Luna, my dear, you're back! We were so worried!" The woman bustled forward, her arms open for an embrace. Luna froze. Every instinct honed in the umbral forge screamed a silent, desperate warning. She reached out with the senses Malakor had forced her to awaken, probing past the familiar face, the warm voice, the loving expression. And she found it. Nothing. Where a soul should have been, a vibrant spark of life and memory, there was only a cold, hollow void. An abyss cleverly draped in a perfect imitation of a person. "What's wrong, dear?" Ilara asked, her smile faltering with practiced concern. "You look as if you've seen a ghost." "You are not her," Luna stated, her voice flat. Her hand went to the weapon on her back, its handle now a familiar, comforting weight. The smile on Ilara's face didn't fade. It stretched. It grew too wide, pulling the skin taut at the corners of her eyes and mouth in a way that was fundamentally inhuman. "Clever girl," the voice hissed, no longer warm and maternal, but a dry rustle of static and dead leaves. The world dissolved. The cottage, the garden, the blue sky. It all wavered like a heat haze and then shattered into a million fragments of gray dust. Luna now stood in a featureless, colorless expanse under a black, starless sky. The hunter dropped its disguise, the image of Ilara melting away to reveal its true form. It was a being of impossible angles, a creature woven from geometric shadows and polished bone. It had no face, only a smooth obsidian plate that reflected nothing. Its limbs were thin and insectile, moving with a twitching non-Euclidean grace. It held no weapon.
It was the weapon. Without a sound, it lunged. Luna didn't have time to manifest her scythe. She threw herself to the side, a shield of silver energy flaring to life, just as a razor-sharp talon of shadow sliced through the space she had just occupied. The shield buckled, not from the force, but from the sheer wrongness of the attack, which seemed to unravel the energy it touched. The scythe bloomed into existence in her hand, its starlight a defiant beacon in the oppressive gloom. The hunter paused, its featureless head tilting as if studying the weapon. Then it attacked again, not as a single entity, but dissolving into a swarm of razor-edged shadows that converged on her from all directions. This was what Malakor had trained her for. She closed her eyes, shutting out the disorienting visual chaos, and focused on her inner senses. The swarm was not a dozen separate attackers. It was one being, connected by invisible threads of will. She moved like a storm, the scythe a continuous arc of light around her, not striking at the shadows themselves, but severing the connections between them. Each severed thread caused a shadow shard to dissolve with a silent shriek that echoed only in her mind. But the hunter was relentless, reforming and splitting apart again and again, its attacks growing more insidious. The very ground turned against her, tendrils of gray nothingness reaching up to grasp at her ankles. The air thickened, filling her lungs with the chilling despair of a dying universe. She fought on, a solitary star against an encroaching night. The despair clung to her, a cold poison, but she anchored herself to the memory of Malakor's voice. Meet it with will. She poured her resolve, her fear, and her newfound strength into her weapon, and the light of the scythe burned brighter. She realized it was a battle of attrition. The hunter was trying to erode her spirit until she was too hollow to fight back. She couldn't win by defending. In a move of desperate inspiration, she stopped severing the threads. Instead, she let the swarm converge, and at the last possible second, she plunged the blade of her scythe into the ground. "You are a creature of the void," she grit out, her voice ringing with newfound power. "You thrive in emptiness, so have it all." She did not draw power from the scythe, she poured her own essence into it. An explosion of pure white-silver light erupted from the ground, a shockwave of creation in order. It was not a destructive force, but a purifying one. It was the light of a Silurian dawn, anathema to a creature born of eternal twilight. The shadow shards screamed, a sound of static and breaking reality. They were not burned, but unwritten, their substance erased by the overwhelming presence of her light. The hunter's central form was forcibly reconstituted by the blast, now flickering and unstable. This was her chance. She ripped the scythe from the ground and lunged. The hunter tried to phase away, but its connection to this plane was damaged. It was momentarily solid. The starlight blade slid through its core without resistance, severing the final anchor that bound it to this reality. The hunter did not die, it simply ceased to be. The faceless mask cracked, revealing the utter star-devouring void within, before it imploded, leaving behind only an echoing silence and the smell of ozone. The gray landscape dissolved, and she was standing on the dirt path again. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. The cottage was still there, but it looked different now. It was old, weathered, and dark. The chimney was cold. Hesitantly, she pushed open the door. The air inside was thick with the dust of years. Furniture was covered in white sheets. It was a house that had been abandoned for a very long time. On a small table by the door, propped against a dusty lantern, was a single sealed envelope. Her name was written on it in Ilara's familiar, elegant script. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "My dearest Luna," the letter began. If you are reading this, then the day we have always dreaded has come to pass, and it means we are gone. We are so sorry for the deception, my child, but we knew of no other way. We were not just a simple couple. We were keepers, a lineage sworn to protect the embers of the past. Your parents entrusted you to us moments before they fell, begging us to hide you, to keep you safe from the shadows that hunted them. The collar was not to control you, but to mask you. It was a desperate measure, a way to hide your light from things that feast upon it. We knew it was dimming your true self, and it broke our hearts every day. We gave you the books on demonology, hoping you might find answers we were forbidden to speak. We kept our distance to weaken the trail that would inevitably lead to you. We have known for weeks that something was coming. We felt the change in the shadows. Our final act as your guardians is this: to leave.
Our presence here would only have endangered you further, a weakness for the hunter to exploit. We have gone to a place where it cannot follow, leaving this letter and our love as the only things left behind. The house, our memories, they were all just walls for your cage. Now the cage is open. Do not mourn for us. We lived our lives in service to a promise made to your parents. Our only regret is that we could not see the magnificent woman you would become. Be strong. Be the light you were born to be. Find your new path. With all our love, Ilara and Fendro. Luna sank to her knees, the letter clutched in her hand. The tears she shed were not for the lie, but for the truth of their sacrifice. Her entire life had been a carefully constructed illusion, built not out of malice, but out of a desperate protective love. She stayed there until the last light of the sun had faded, and the moon cast silver patterns on the dusty floor. The grief was a sharp, clean ache, a final goodbye to the child she had been. Rising to her feet, she stepped out of the empty house for the last time. The scythe materialized in her hand, no longer a weapon of desperation, but a part of her. She looked up at the vast, star-dusted sky, feeling the echoes of her ancestors and the faint, distant thrum of Malakor's immense, lonely power. Her old life was gone, erased. Her family was gone. Her home was a hollow memory. She was alone. She was hunted. And for the first time in her life, she was free. The Null had sent a hunter to find an ember. They had found a wildfire instead. The cool night air was a balm on her skin, a stark contrast to the oppressive, sterile atmosphere of the hunter's illusory world. The grief for Ilara and Fendro was a clean, sharp wound, a pain she could embrace because it was real. It was the first truly real thing, aside from Malakor, that she had felt in a long time. Everything else had been a lie, a cage crafted from kindness. She dismissed the scythe, letting it dissolve back into the starlight within her. She didn't need to hold it to feel it. It was part of her now, a constant, low thrum beneath her skin, a promise of power and purpose. She began to walk, not back toward the realms of demons, but away from the cottage, following the moonlit path into the deep woods. She had no destination, only a direction, forward. The forest, once a place of shadows she had used for hiding, now felt different. It was alive. With her enhanced senses, she could feel the slow, deep life of the ancient trees, the skittering heartbeats of nocturnal creatures, the flow of water in a subterranean stream. The world was a symphony she had only ever heard as a muffled beat through a thick wall. Now, the wall was gone. A sound, sharp and out of place, cut through the natural harmony. The snap of a twig, too heavy for a fox or a deer. Luna stopped, her body instantly shifting into the ready stance Malakor had drilled into her. She didn't manifest her weapon. She listened, she felt.
The presence was clumsy, breathing heavily. It radiated not the cold void of the null, but a messy, chaotic jumble of greed, fear, and a hint of desperation. From behind a thicket of ferns, a figure stumbled out. It was a demon, but a low-ranking one, with cracked, leathery skin and a pair of chipped, stubby horns. He held a crude, rust-pitted axe, and his yellow eyes were wide with a mixture of awe and terror. She recognized him. He had been one of the lesser demons in the crowd at her auction, his face a mask of slavering desire. "You," he rasped, pointing a trembling, clawed finger at her. "The Silurian. I followed. I thought, if I could capture you." The Luna from a month ago would have been terrified. She would have vanished, run, hidden. The Luna who had faced a soul-eating assassin in a void of nothingness simply stared at him, her frost-colored eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. She could feel his intent. He wanted the bounty. He was dreaming of the wealth and status her capture would bring, yet he was terrified of the power he had heard she possessed. "You should not have followed me," she said, her voice calm and carrying a resonance that made the leaves on the nearby trees tremble. He took a hesitant step forward, trying to muster his courage. "Lord Malakor is not here to protect you now. I will take you, and the bounty will make me a king." He let out a clumsy roar and charged. Luna didn't move. She waited until he was almost upon her, the crude axe raised high. Then, with a sigh of what felt almost like pity, she raised her hand, palm open. A net of fine silver threads, the same energy that formed her shield, shot from her fingertips. It enveloped the demon, who crashed into it with a dull thud. The net constricted, holding him fast, the silver light searing his skin wherever it touched. He shrieked, dropping his axe and struggling uselessly against his bonds. She walked slowly toward him, her footsteps silent on the forest floor. She knelt, looking into his terrified yellow eyes. "There is no bounty," she said softly. "There is only a girl who wishes to be left alone, and a power that will no longer allow her to hide." She could have killed him. The thought was there, a cold, simple solution whispered by the part of her that had been forged in combat. But another voice, older and deeper, the echo of her ancestors, the architects, stayed her hand. They did not build by destroying. She placed her hand on the demon's forehead. He flinched, expecting a killing blow. Instead, a wave of silver energy flowed from her palm into his mind. She did not erase his memory. She altered it. She took the image of the powerful, valuable Silurian and replaced it with a vision of a horrifying, vengeful spirit that had brought down a cosmic horror with a blast of purifying light. She imbued the memory with a fraction of the despair she had felt from the hunter's blade. She pulled her hand back. "Go," she commanded, and the net of light dissolved. The demon scrambled backward, his eyes now filled with a primal, soul-deep terror that went far beyond mere fear. He looked at her not as a prize, but as an omen, a force of nature he had been suicidally foolish to approach. Without a word, he turned and fled, crashing through the undergrowth in a blind panic, his shrieks fading into the night. Luna stood, the silence of the forest settling around her once more. She had not only defended herself, she had controlled the narrative. She had turned a potential pursuer into a messenger of fear. She was no longer just the hunted. She was the ghost stories they would tell. A faint smile touched her lips. Malakor would have called her methods inefficient. He would have told her to eliminate the threat permanently. But this was her path, not his. She looked up at the moon. The road ahead was unknown. The threat of the null was a galaxy-spanning shadow, and Malakor was a mystery she had yet to unravel. But for the first time, she was not reacting. She was acting. She was the one making the choices, wielding the power, writing the next chapter. And she was ready to see where the path would lead. With a final glance at the empty cottage, a silent farewell to the girl she had been, Luna turned and walked deeper into the embrace of the wild, a living legend searching for her purpose among the stars.
The demon's panicked flight was an ugly sound in the otherwise serene night, a final, jarring note from a life she was leaving behind forever. When his screams were finally swallowed by the woods, a profound silence settled, deeper than any she had known before. It was the silence of a blank page. She walked for what felt like hours, letting the rhythm of her steps and the cool caress of the night air settle the storm inside her. The grief for Ilara and Fendrel was a steady ache, but beneath it, the ancestral memory stirred. They were no longer a roaring flood, but a vast, deep ocean, and she was just now learning to navigate its currents. She let her mind drift, focusing not on a specific memory, but on a concept, a word: keepers. An image bloomed behind her eyes, sharp and vivid. It was not her memory, but her mother's. She saw through her mother's eyes, felt the cool, metallic object being pressed into a man's hand. Fendrel, younger, his face etched with grim determination. "The Nexus key," her mother's voice whispered, a sound that was both strange and as familiar as her own heartbeat. "It will open a way to the observatory at Xylos. If she ever needs to find the truth of what was lost, if she needs to find the archives of the keepers, it begins there." The memory shifted, showing the city of Xylos. It was not a city of demons or humans, but a vertical metropolis built into the heart of a colossal petrified tree that floated in a calm silver nebula. Spidery bridges of light connected its various levels, and creatures of 100 different shapes and sizes moved along its glowing pathways. It was a hub, a neutral ground, a crossroads. The memory faded, leaving behind a single burning piece of information: the key. Where was it? Ilara and Fendrel had fled. They would not have left such an important object behind. Luna cast her senses back towards the abandoned cottage, not with her eyes, but with the essence Malakor had taught her to use. She probed the memory of the place, searching for a resonance, a flicker of Silurian energy left behind. There, a faint silver glimmer, hidden beneath the mundane. It wasn't in the house. It was under the flat gray stone at the entrance to the garden, the one Ilara had always complained was loose. She turned, her movements now filled with purpose, and retraced her steps. The cottage was a dark silhouette against the pre-dawn sky. She knelt by the garden path, slid her fingers beneath the familiar stone, and heaved. It came loose with a grating sound. Beneath it, nestled in the dark earth, was a small velvet pouch. Inside was a crystal, shaped like a complex, multifaceted seed. It was cool to the touch and pulsed with a faint internal light that matched the rhythm of her own heart. The Nexus key. Holding it, she felt another layer of the world reveal itself. Faint lines of energy, invisible before, now crisscrossed the forest around her. They were ley lines, pathways of power. And she now understood that certain intersections were gateways, waypoints that could be opened with a key. One such intersection was nearby, at the heart of a clearing where an ancient lightning-scarred oak stood. She found the clearing easily, the key in her hand acting as a compass, humming with greater intensity the closer she got. She stood before the oak, its gnarled branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward the sky. Holding the crystal aloft, she channeled a sliver of her own power into it, just as her ancestral memory showed her. The key flared with brilliant silver light. The air before the oak tree shimmered, distorted, and then tore open, revealing not the forest beyond, but a swirling vortex of silver and violet energy, a portal. Taking a breath that tasted of ozone and starlight, she stepped through. The sensation was like being dissolved into pure energy and then instantly reassembled.
She stumbled out onto a platform of woven living wood, the air humming with the traffic of countless beings. The sheer scale of Xylos was breathtaking. She stood on one of the lower branches of the petrified tree city, looking up at an impossible vertical landscape. Buildings carved from amber and pearl clung to the central trunk, glowing with soft internal light. Ships with sails of pure energy drifted between the branches, and the air was filled with 1,000 different languages, a symphony of commerce and conversation. She was an anomaly here, but a far less conspicuous one. Her gray-blue skin and white hair drew curious glances. But in a city populated by crystalline entities, beings of living gas, and four-armed merchants with iridescent scales, she was just another traveler. For the first time, she felt not hidden, but anonymous. Her first task was to find the observatory. According to the memory, it was located near the city's apex, high above.
She began to walk, joining the flow of traffic across a bridge of light. The sheer normalcy of it all was disorienting. Vendors sold steaming noodles next to kiosks hawking minor magical charms. A group of short, stout, rock-like beings argued loudly over the price of a polished geode. It was a universe away from the life-or-death struggle she had just endured. As she ascended through the city on a series of gravitational lifts, the air grew thinner and cleaner. The crowds thinned, the raucous markets replaced by quiet temples, academies, and halls of knowledge. Finally, she reached the apex. Here, at the very top of the colossal tree, stood a dome of pure, transparent crystal, through which the entire silver nebula could be seen. This was the observatory. The entrance was guarded by two silent, towering constructs of brass and polished wood. They did not challenge her as she approached, their multifaceted glass eyes simply tracking her movement. The heavy carved door swung open, revealing a vast circular room. The floor was a detailed star chart that shifted and flowed, and the walls were lined not with books, but with glowing crystalline spires, the data archives of the keepers. A single figure stood in the center of the room, looking out at the nebula. He was ancient, his body seemingly carved from the same petrified wood as the city itself, with veins of glowing amber running through his skin. He turned as she entered, his eyes the color of old, cracked resin. "So," the old being's voice was like the rustle of dry leaves and the grinding of stone. "An ember has finally found its way back to the hearth. We have waited a long time, Silurian." Luna's hand, which had been resting near the hilt of her unseen scythe, slowly relaxed. The being before her radiated an aura not of hostility, but of immense, weary patience, like a mountain that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. "You know what I am," she stated, her voice steady. It was not a question. "We know what you represent," the keeper corrected gently. He gestured with a three-fingered wooden hand towards the center of the room. "I am Lorien, the caretaker of this archive, and you, last daughter of the Silurians, are a living memory, something the null has failed to erase." He began to walk, his movements slow and deliberate, like a root pushing through earth. Luna fell into step beside him. "Elara and Fendril, they were keepers?"
"Of a field operative order, yes," Lorien confirmed, his resinous eyes fixed on the shifting star chart beneath their feet. "Our purpose is not to fight, but to remember. When the null consumes a world, a species, a truth, they seek to wipe it from all existence. We gather the echoes, the fragments, the memories. We preserve the story of what was, so that the void does not win a total victory." He stopped before one of the glowing crystal spires. It was taller than the others, and its light was a soft, familiar gray-blue. "This archive is an echo of your people. Most of it is dormant. It requires a key to unlock its deeper truths. My blood, Luna whispered, the knowledge rising unbidden from her own ancestral memory. Indeed, Lorien said. Touch it. Hesitantly, Luna reached out and placed her palm against the smooth, warm surface of the crystal. The moment her skin made contact, the spire flared with brilliant silver light. The observatory dissolved around her, and she was standing under a violet sky, surrounded by the glowing silver spires of her ancestors' city. It was the memory from her awakening, but this time it was clear, stable, and breathtakingly real. She felt the joy of her people, heard their song-like language, and understood their connection to the cosmos not as a power to be wielded, but as a harmony to be maintained. Then a subtle wrongness. A patch of the violet sky turned gray. The song faltered. A spire in the distance didn't explode or crumble. It simply faded, as if it had never been. The silence spread like a contagion, unmaking everything it touched. There was no battle, no grand struggle. It was a slow, inexorable erasure, and the terror it generated was 1,000 times worse than any physical violence. The vision shattered, and she was back in the observatory, gasping, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. That is the truth of the null, Lorien said, his voice soft but grim. They do not conquer, they delete. Your parents and your people did not fall in a glorious battle. They were unwritten from the pages of the universe. You are the last word of their story. Luna wiped the tear away, her sorrow solidifying into cold resolve. There is one fighting them, a demon lord named Malakor. He is the one who freed me, the one who is training me to fight. A complex emotion flickered in Lorien's ancient eyes, something akin to caution and deep concern. Ah, yes, the Ashen King.
Malakor is an ancient and powerful player in a game that began long before your people were born. He fights the null, this is true, but a wildfire also fights the forest. Do not mistake a shared enemy for a shared purpose. He led her toward the center of the star chart. Malakor seeks to rule the ashes. He builds weapons, amasses power, and dominates all he touches. His methods are of the shadow. You, Silurian, are a child of light and order. Your purpose is not to rule, but to create, not to dominate, but to restore. He is the only reason I survived, Luna insisted, a defensive edge to her voice. Is he? Lorien countered, his gaze piercing. Or did he simply find a lost, priceless sword and begin sharpening it for his own war? Be careful, child. When you are forged into a weapon, you lose the ability to be anything else. The warning settled in her heart like a cold stone. She thought of Malakor's relentless training, his talk of her being a necessity, his cold, calculating efficiency. She had seen it as protection, as mentorship. Now she saw the outline of a cage far more subtle than the slaver's chains. Then what am I supposed to do? She asked, her voice laced with desperation. Hiding failed. Fighting is all he has taught me. You must learn to build, Lorien answered, pointing a finger at the star chart on the floor. A constellation glowed brightly. This archive is merely an echo. The true legacy of your people, their collected knowledge of creation and reality, is not stored in memory, but in celestial machines. They are called the celestial orreries. They are dormant, waiting for a Silurian hand to reawaken them. They can restore the song the null has silenced. The star chart zoomed in on a single turbulent point of light. The first orrery is located on the automatum world of Cygnus X1. It is a world of dead machines and forgotten logic, a graveyard of a war fought eons ago. It is a hostile, dangerous place, but it is a place the null would not think to look for a spark of creation. He looked at her, his ancient face filled with a heavy solemnity. Malakor has taught you how to be a weapon.
To survive Cygnus X1, you will need to be. But to awaken the orrery, you will need to be a Silurian. You must be both the key and the hand that turns it. The path ahead was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. It was not Malakor's path. It was hers. It was a mission born not of vengeance, but of restoration.
"I will go," Luna said, her voice ringing with a conviction she had never felt before. "The Nexus key will open the way when you are near the system," Lorien said, a flicker of what looked like pride in his eyes. "We keepers will watch. We cannot interfere, but we will remember your deeds." He offered one final piece of counsel. "Do not let the shadow you walk with extinguish the light you carry. They can coexist within you, but you must be the one who decides which is the master." With a nod of thanks and a final look at the swirling nebula through the dome, Luna turned and walked out of the observatory. She stood once more on the high branch of Xylos, the vibrant, chaotic life of the city tree spread out below her. She was no longer a lost girl hiding from a bounty. She was not a slave cowering in a cage. She was not even a weapon being honed for another's war. She was Luna, the last Silurian, and she had a legacy to rebuild. The hunt was over. The quest had begun. The slaver strode to the front of the cage, a cruel grin splitting his face. He grabbed the bars with one hand and a thick, rusted chain with the other. A mechanism groaned, and the front of the cage lifted, exposing her fully to the leering, hungry eyes of the assembled crowd. A wave of murmurs rippled through the arena, a mix of greed, lust, and scientific curiosity. "Behold!" the slaver bellowed, his voice magically amplified to reach the highest tiers of stone seating. "A prize not seen in 1,000 cycles, the last of her kind." With a flick of his wrist, he snagged the edge of her cloak and ripped it from her shoulders. The fine gold fabric of her gown shimmered under the arena's harsh, ethereal lighting, but it was her skin that drew a collective gasp from the audience. The unique gray-blue hue seemed to drink in the light, a stark contrast to the fiery reds, char-blacks, and sickly greens of the demons watching. Her long white braid fell over one shoulder, and her frost-colored eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and defiance, scanned the sea of monstrous faces. The slaver grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back to display the cold metal collar around her neck. "The lineage of the Silurians, thought to be myth, thought to be extinct. Their blood holds ancient power. Their skin is impervious to all but the most potent of magics. What will you bid for this singular treasure? A warrior? A servant? A breeder to revive a long-dead line?" The bidding started immediately, a chaotic roar of numbers and shouted claims. A corpulent demon with multiple mouths shrieked a price that made Luna's stomach clench. A wisp-thin sorcerer with eyes like burning coals countered instantly. The price climbed higher and higher, the numbers becoming meaningless sounds to Luna. She felt like a piece of meat, a decorative object to be claimed. Her gaze darted desperately, searching for an escape that didn't exist. She saw the figure in the trench coat again, standing motionless near one of the main tunnels, an island of calm in the frenzied storm of bidding. Just as the slaver was about to bring his gavel down for a grotesque horned warlord, a new voice cut through the den. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that silenced every other creature in the arena. 1,000,000 soul shards. The crowd turned as one. Stepping out from the tunnel, shedding the long trench coat to reveal the same impeccably tailored dark tunic from the starry, was the council demon. The copper accents on his clothing seemed to glow with their own inner fire. His dark eyes were fixed not on the slaver, but directly on Luna.
As their gazes locked, the sensation from the night before returned tenfold, a shockwave that vibrated through her very soul. Mine. This time, the word felt less like a thought and more like a fact, a fundamental truth of the universe settling into place. The slaver's jaw dropped. "Lord Malakor, an honor," he stammered, bowing low. "A winning bid indeed." Malakor took a slow, deliberate step forward, his presence forcing a path to clear through the crowd. "That was not a bid," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that still reached every ear. "It was a statement of value. She is not for sale." The slaver's greedy smile faltered, replaced by confusion and fear. "But, my lord, the auction." "The auction is over," Malakor stated, now standing just feet from the stage. He tossed a small, heavy pouch onto the stage floor. It landed with a soft, final thud. "Your payment for having found her. Now, open the cage." The slaver scrambled to obey, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the lock. The moment the gate swung open, Malakor was on the stage. He ignored the slaver completely, his entire focus on Luna. He knelt before her, his expression unreadable, and reached for the collar. His fingers, warm and surprisingly gentle, brushed against her skin as he examined the locking mechanism. A soft click echoed in the silent arena, and the cold metal fell away from her neck. He rose to his full, intimidating height, extending a hand to her. "Come," was all he said. Luna hesitated, staring at his offered hand. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But underneath it, that strange, powerful connection hummed, pulling her in, promising something. Safety? Destiny? She didn't know, but it was a better choice than any other she had. Slowly, she placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, secure, and as he gently pulled her to her feet, his dark eyes never left hers. He led her off the stage, the entire demon realm watching in stunned silence as he claimed his prize. The crowd parted before them, a wave of fear and deference, creating a wide path through the arena's main tunnel. Malakor's grip on her hand was not painful, but it was absolute, an anchor in the swirling vortex of her emotions. No one dared meet their eyes. The lessers bowed their heads until their chins touched their chests, while the higher demons simply averted their gazes, a clear sign of respect for a power they would not challenge. As they reached the shadowed exit of the arena, the slaver's greedy voice rang out from behind them. "My lord, that pouch, it is generous, but the bidding had reached far beyond that sum. A creature of her rarity." Malakor stopped, but did not turn. The temperature in the tunnel dropped several degrees. "You were paid for finding her," he said, his voice a low vibration that seemed to shake the very stones. "You were not paid for owning her. You never did." "But," the slaver began, taking a foolish step forward. Without looking back, Malakor made a subtle gesture with his free hand. A shadow detached itself from the wall, coalescing into a whip-thin tendril of pure darkness. It lashed out, silent and swift, wrapping around the slaver's throat. The demon clawed at the umbral appendage, his gurgles turning to choked silence as he was lifted a foot off the ground. "Be grateful you are leaving with your life," Malakor stated coldly. "Do not tempt me to reconsider my generosity." With another flick of his wrist, the shadow dissipated, dropping the gasping, terrified slaver to the grimy floor. Malakor resumed walking as if nothing had happened, pulling Luna gently along with him. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was a power she had never witnessed up close. Effortless, absolute, and utterly terrifying. They emerged into the crimson twilight of the main thoroughfare. The walk to the strange, out-of-place house was conducted in utter silence. Luna watched as the world she knew warped around his presence.
Demons who had once pushed her aside now scrambled to get out of their path. She was no longer invisible or a target of scorn. She was an attachment to him, and that granted her a terrifying, unasked-for status. The house was even more imposing up close. Carved from a single piece of obsidian-like rock, it seemed to absorb the realm's reddish light rather than reflect it. The heavy, iron-banded door swung open on its own as they approached, revealing not the expected gloom, but a vast, quiet hall. The floors were polished marble that swirled with veins of silver. The air smelled not of sulfur and decay, but of old paper, strange incense, and something clean, like ozone after a storm. Tapestries depicting ancient battles and forgotten constellations hung on the walls, their threads glowing with a subtle luminescence. He led her through the silent hall and into a vast library. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound tomes. In the center of the room, a low fire crackled in a wide hearth, casting a warm, flickering light. He finally released her hand and turned to face her fully. For the first time, Luna could see the details of his face: sharp, aristocratic features, skin like burnished copper, and eyes that held the depth of a starless night sky. "You have questions," he stated. It was not a question. Luna found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Are you going to sell me?" A flicker of something, annoyance, surprise, crossed his features. "I do not buy things only to sell them, especially not when they are priceless." He gestured to a pair of high-backed chairs near the fire. "Sit, you must be exhausted." Wary, she did as he asked, perching on the edge of the plush velvet cushion. He remained standing, looking down at her, his expression intense. "That necklace you wear," he said, his voice softer now. "The one you touch when you are anxious. Who gave it to you?" Luna's hand flew to her throat, her fingers closing around the familiar snug band. The family that took me in. They said it would protect me." Malakor's lips thinned into a grim line. "Protect you, or control you." He took a step closer, his gaze locked on the black collar. "It is a suppressor, little one, a very old, very powerful one. It dampens your true nature, hides your full power from the world, and from yourself." Luna's fingers tightened on the smooth, cool band. "No, they said it was for my safety, to help me blend in." "A cage gilded with good intentions is still a cage," Malakor countered, his voice devoid of pity. "They hid you, yes, but in doing so, they left you ignorant, defenseless. They severed you from your own heritage, leaving you to believe you were nothing more than a curiosity with unusually colored skin." He took another step, his presence dominating the vast room. The firelight danced across the sharp planes of his face, making his dark eyes seem like portals to another dimension. "That collar has been bleeding your essence since the day it was clasped around your neck. It muted your scent, clouded the minds of those who looked too closely, and, most importantly, it blocked your access to the memories inherent in your bloodline." Her breath hitched. The dream, the fragmented, frustrating loop of her childhood trauma. Was that all they had left her with? "My memories?" she whispered, the word tasting of ash. "Every Silurian is born with the echo of their ancestors, a wellspring of knowledge, instinct, and power. Yours has been damned." He stopped before her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I can remove it, but I must warn you, the sudden return of what you have lost, it will not be pleasant." The choice hung in the air between them, heavy and absolute. To trust this terrifying, magnificent demon who had bought her and spoken of her as a possession, or to cling to the half-life given to her by a family whose kindness might have been a lie. She thought of the slavers' chains, the leering crowd, the constant gnawing fear she had lived with her entire life. Then she looked into Malakor's eyes and felt that impossible, soul-deep resonance again. It wasn't a feeling of being owned. It was a feeling of being found. Slowly, she nodded. He didn't touch her. Instead, he raised his hand, palm open, a few inches from her throat. A low hum filled the room, vibrating from his body and sinking into her bones. The black necklace began to glow with a faint, angry red light. It grew hotter against her skin, not a burning heat, but a deep, pressurized warmth that made it hard to breathe. "Do not fight it," he commanded, his voice a low anchor in the rising storm inside her. A dam inside her broke. It was not a gentle release, but a violent, explosive shattering. A roar filled her ears, silencing the crackling fire. A blinding white light flared behind her eyes, and with it came a torrent of sensation. She felt the chill of deep space, tasted the metallic tang of a dying star, and heard the whispered symphony of 1,000 generations of her ancestors all speaking at once. Images, sharp and painful, flooded her mind. A city of glowing silver spires under a violet sky. Her true parents, their faces shimmering with starlight, their skin the same gray-blue as hers, smiling down at her. The language of her people, flowing into her mind, not as words to be learned, but as truths to be remembered. And the power, oh, the power! It was like cold fire, a liquid universe pouring through her veins, awakening dormant nerves and rewriting her very cells. Faint, intricate silver patterns, like frost on a winter windowpane, bloomed across her skin. Her arms, her neck, her face, glowing with a soft, internal luminescence before slowly fading back to subtlety. Her frost-colored eyes blazed with light, the pupils momentarily becoming silver stars. The black necklace clattered to the marble floor, now just a dull, lifeless piece of metal. The sudden, overwhelming influx was too much. The library spun. The 1,000 voices became a deafening shriek, and the light behind her eyes consumed everything. With a final shuddering gasp, Luna's world went dark, and she pitched forward into unconsciousness. Malakor caught her before she hit the floor, sweeping her into his arms with an ease that belied her weight. She was limp, her head lolling against his shoulder, her white hair spilling over his dark tunic. He looked down at her face, now peaceful in its slumber, and noted the faint, silvery tracings that now shimmered just beneath the surface of her skin. He carried her from the library, his long strides silent on the marble floors, and ascended a grand winding staircase. The corridors of his home were dark and quiet, but they seemed to bend to his will, a path lighting before him as he walked. He entered a large, sparsely furnished bedchamber, where the only light came from a vast window that looked out not on the fiery realm outside, but on a swirling nebula of purple and gold. Gently, he laid her down on the bed of black silk sheets, pulling a heavy velvet blanket over her. For a long moment, he simply stood and watched her, his expression a mask of unreadable contemplation. "Asleep," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that was more for himself than for her. "Good. When you wake, your education will begin."